Hey everyone, I just played Alba, a wildlife adventure, and it got me thinking a lot about the state of the world and my place within it, about the modern nature of power fantasies, about how gosh dang hard it is to get a picture of this YouTube guidelines friendly bird. Don't make me come up there, I'll find a way. Developed by Us2 Games and released at the end of everybody's favourite nightmare year 2020, Alba, a wildlife adventure is exactly that. You play as Alba, a young girl visiting her grandparents at their home on an island off the coast of Spain, who takes it upon herself to document the local fauna as a means to drum up support for environmental conservation in the face of encroaching corporate greed and political corruption. It is low-stakes, light entertainment with a little education sprinkled on the top, and on the surface it seems like a baby game for babies, but while the mechanics are very simple, they are also super engaging, and the whole thing is wrapped up in an abundance of style. It's just a fun 3 to 4 hour experience that is easily accessible to people of all ages. It is also one of the best power fantasies I've played in years, so let's talk about it. But before I get my hands into the guts of this game, if you enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, hit that gosh dang dingle bell, comment, share it around, all that lovely stuff. Also, please consider watching my other videos. I'd really appreciate it. Now let's get to it. For such a short game, Alba, a wildlife adventure packs a surprising amount of story into its runtime. Alba's come to visit her grandparents on their island home in the week leading up to a local festival, but all is not well. The island's nature reserve is set to be bulldozed and paved over, so that a grand new hotel can be built on top of it. So, in order to save the reserve and stop the construction of the hotel, Alba and her friend Inez set out to get as many signatures for their petition as they can, and to rally support, they decide to show everyone in town just what they'll be missing if the reserve is destroyed by photographing all the local animals in their natural habitats. There are twists and turns along the way. Leaking pesticides start to poison the animals, the island's castle begins restoration, a beach is completely trashed. Alba's quest to photograph every animal on the island is closely intertwined with her goal to snap a picture of the elusive and endangered Iberian lynx too. All through the week the island's residents are busy getting ready for the festival on Saturday as well. It is a comfy, family-friendly conflict, with a couple of slimy villains and a big heart. It does start to fall apart toward the end. The game has 2 completely separate climaxes, one right after the other, that feel like they should be more connected and impactful on the story than they are. But other than that, the story's fine, and while on the surface it might sound overly saccharine, there is a surprising amount of depth to be found here. What immediately drew me to Alba was the game's presentation. It is just so charming. The simple designs, soft edges, and warm colours give everything the feel of a kids' show or a toy line, right down to the blocking of the cutscenes. The island has a surprisingly large number of residents, and each of them is unique. Take Clara the conservationist, Simon the vet, Marina and her dog Socks, Pepe the absolute unit, Laura the cop, or Paco the sleazy businessman. No single NPC feels common or reused. They all have their own outfits, their own personalities, even their own animations, and they are all instantly recognisable. They don't just stand around waiting for Alba to come up and talk to them either. Even the minor NPCs move around the island across the course of the story, and many of them will react to and discuss plot beats if you take the time to chat. All of them are pleasant, at worst a bit rude, but what's great about it is that not everyone is on your side about stopping the hotel's construction and saving the nature reserve. Not even Alba's grandfather completely. The island's tourism industry has dried up since Alba's grandparents were young, and some residents think a new hotel will not only create jobs through its construction, but revive local businesses once visitors start flying in. These aren't unreasonable arguments to make in support of a project like the hotel either, and it's this kind of maturity and complexity in the writing that elevates the game well beyond whatever initial impressions you may get from the premise. Of course, the real stars of the show are the animals. They are absolutely everywhere, and like the game's human characters, they feel authentic. Some will race right underfoot, others will keep their distance on a far-off rock or tree branch, walk right up to a domesticated animal and it won't care, but get too close to a wild animal and they'll run away. Sure, sometimes they get stuck on corners or freak out against walls, but it's rare and it doesn't ruin the experience. The animals feel authentic in their designs too. The game treats them with much greater respect to realistic shapes and proportions than its human characters, without sacrificing the overall style. Domesticated animals closer to humans, like cats and dogs and goats, all share a little of the same cartoony design as their owners, just like in real life, but the wilder the animal gets, the more realistic its shape becomes, to the point where it would be easily recognizable accessible to you in real life if you ever happen to cross paths with one. They have just as much personality as the human residents of the island too, perhaps even more so thanks to these amazing portraits you get whenever photographing one for your first time. There are some fantastic pictures all up, but this partridge has to be my favourite. It looks like he's about to throw down to protect the environment. Save the trees, or else. The island which everyone calls home might be pretty small in terms of literal space, but it feels big. The town is only a couple of streets, a plaza, and the beachside promenade. The nature reserve is basically a figure eight of boardwalks, and the ruined castle is only a couple of chambers at the top of a steep hill. But the game does a great job of hiding how close everything is to everything else through dense forest and marshland, or high walls and steep rises in the terrain. It only becomes obvious how small the island really is when you get up somewhere high, but by that point the stunning views give the impression that you've climbed much higher than you actually have. It feels like it was purposefully designed to be seen through a child's eyes, Alba's eyes, so well in fact that when you're briefly given control of Alba's grandfather and the field of view pulls back, the illusion shatters instantly. It just looks wrong in a way that it doesn't at any other point in the game, and I can't even describe why. There's just something off about it. The only other slight letdown in terms of the visuals is the lighting, which changes very arbitrarily sometimes when you turn the camera, but other than that, the presentation is stellar. The same is true of the audio. There's no voice acting, but the amount of animal noises the game can boast more than makes up for it. It's to the point where the animals make up more of the game's soundtrack than any of the music, and that seems entirely by design. Outside of the big story moments, most of the music you'll hear throughout the game will come from radios placed around the island. But what is there is good. It all fits the vibe the game is aiming for really well, be it a happy call to action each morning, or a more somber piece during the climactic fire. Beyond the music and the orchestra of animals, the sound design does a great job of matching the tone of the art style, like the little percussive beats that accompany dialogue, the pops and whispers of the menus, the rustling of the wind through the trees, and the soft padding of footsteps along a path. The presentation all comes together to create a relaxing experience that is more than you might expect at first. This game could have very easily been a cheap and easy first-person wander through the wilderness without a single NPC or a hint of a story. It could have very easily beat you over the head with its message by turning everyone who supports the hotel's construction into a foaming-at-the-mouth straw man, but the developers went the extra mile to flesh out the island and its residents to create what feels like a living, breathing world that celebrates diversity both within the animal kingdom and humanity itself. Having visited a small European island myself, albeit in Greece rather than Spain, it feels very authentic to the kind of place it's meant to represent, and gives you more reason to care about everything that's happening than if the game just set you loose with a camera and a list of animals to photograph. The gameplay of Alba, a wildlife adventure, will be instantly recognisable to anyone who's ever played Pokemon Snap or the vastly superior Fight Me You Can't Bug Snacks. There are 62 unique species to find around the island, and they are absolutely everywhere. In the trees, on the ground, in the sky, in the water, on the beach. Oh no. Taking pictures is super simple and super quick, which really helps when trying to catch any of the game's frighteningly fast fauna. The photographs don't have to be great, apparently they don't even have to contain the animal in question, although it feels good when they are, and they do. They just have to be close enough for the phone's wildlife app to identify the subject. Once you snap a new, unique animal, the picture picture gets added to Alba's wildlife guide, and you get a nice big tick beside the animal's name in the section's table of contents. It feels good to fill in the guide. Each new animal snapped brings with it a hit of dopamine and a sense of accomplishment, especially when it's an animal you've been struggling to photograph all game. Oh, come here, you. Not that any one animal is particularly hard to find. Very few of them go out of their way to hide from you, and none of them will defend themselves no matter how dangerous their real-life counterparts may be. Mostly they just try and stay out of your way, wary as they are of humans like real animals can be. The challenge comes from getting close enough to photograph them. Birds might be flying too high for the wildlife app to identify. Others might be chilling out of reach beyond environmental obstacles. Some are fast and must be approached carefully. Even when you can get close to them, sometimes it can be easy to miss when there's an animal you've yet to photograph hanging around an area you've already gone through. For example, the game's various gulls and tits can appear very similar at a cursory glance. A few of the animals are just so small it can be easy to miss them completely. But if you ever find yourself stuck, you can always just hop into the wildlife guide to get a better look at the animals you're still missing. Each animal's entry comes with a sample of the sounds they make too, so if you're having trouble finding them, all you have to do is keep an ear out. Despite how much natural noise there is in this game, each animal does have a unique call or song, and you can pick them out if you know what to listen for. Taking pictures might be the bread and butter of the gameplay loop, but it's not the only thing you can do around the island. There's litter to clean up, signs to restore, buildings to mend, shortcuts to open, birdhouses to repair, animals to save from oil and plastic and toxic green schmooze. Sometimes completing side objectives gives you access to new areas with new animals. They can open up shortcuts between areas or make the animals stand still long enough to actually get a good picture of them. A lot of them can get you another couple of signatures for the petition and a nice front page headline in the local paper too. And if you find yourself crossing paths with anyone around town, they're always up for a chat. Just talking to them can sometimes give you extra side missions, so it's generally a good idea to check in with them each day. If you ever find yourself in need of a break, the island is covered in places to just sit down and enjoy the view too. Overall, Alba's gameplay is very comfy. You're given access to pretty much the entire island from day one, and it feels good to explore its nooks and crannies. The one snag I think it does have is how it never tells you how at least one animal from every area can only be found after a certain point in the game, which for a completionist like me can turn this self-described chilectathon into a nightmare of frustration, albeit briefly. Punch Alba a wildlife adventure into Google and one of the top autocomplete results will be Banal, because it appears so late in the game in such a relatively out-of-the-way area without any indication that it's there unless you happen to pass it by. As you progress through the first couple of days and start getting messages challenging you to snap a picture of a sparrowhawk or a hoopoe? How do you say this word? What are you? You realise the game is going to keep a few of its more impressive specimens for quests, be they part of the main story or side content, but the little itch of dread at the back of your mind that you're going to miss something never really goes away. But that's really the only problem I have with the gameplay. There is a bit of occasional slowdown and a typo or two in the dialogue, but both were so rare that they're barely worth mentioning for more than this sentence. You can't fast travel around the island, but it's so small that any kind of system of that kind would be redundant. The one acceptable exception being the boat that takes you between the main island and the smaller landmass of La Roqueta just offshore. And given the aim of the game is to create the experience of wandering through the wilderness, any such mechanic would be antithetical to the mission statement anyway. It wants you to kick back and take in the world, and it is exceptional at getting you into that headspace. I love nature documentaries, especially those by David Attenborough, but there's a difference between being shown these animals with editing and music and narration and experiencing them in real life right in front of you. I think that's why this game resonated with me so much. The game's message is one of environmental conservation, but it never beats you over the head with it. There's no screed about putting aside your phone for one goddamn second to take in the splendor of the world around you. A smartphone is your most basic tool. There are moments when they say it out loud, but the game knows it doesn't have to tell you it's important to protect protect the environment over and over and over again. All you have to do is take a walk outside, or even just look out a window, and the message becomes self-evident. To just go into the wilderness and share a space with bees amongst the flowers, or let a little bush mouse pass you by on a walking trail, or notice a frog hiding in the branch of a tree. Sometimes you don't even have to leave urban environments to find the natural world peeking through the cracks. I was in Brisbane recently and saw a water dragon lounging in the crook of a tree right in the middle of town. Another time I was visiting my parents and saw a pair of seabirds teaching their chicks how to dig for food in someone's lawn. Sure, our interactions with nature can get pretty intense, and that's something Alba doesn't shy away from. You can't take the wild out of the wilderness, in some cases not even in your own backyard if a snake decides to take up residence, or in the game's case when a fox gets into the henhouse. But I also understand that I'm lucky to live in a place where such experiences, both the good and the bad, are possible right outside my door. For those who may not have that luxury, or who may not want to risk running across anything potentially dangerous, or even who either don't live or have the opportunity to visit Spain, Alba offers the experience of just going outside to get lost in nature for a little bit. And because Alba herself is a child, if you're unfamiliar with the animals, her sense of wonder and curiosity upon finding them passes through to the player as well. I'm not saying it wouldn't still work if Alba had instead been a nature-conscious teenager or an adult scientist, but if the game had gone down either of those roads, it would have lost a piece of itself by making her aware of the impossible weight of the world's problems. Returning briefly to the works of David Attenborough, while working on this video, news broke that the BBC had decided not to broadcast its final episode of his latest series for fear of upsetting troglodytic myrmidons, who might find its conservationist message and criticism of industry offensive, and that is just crushing to hear. A lot of news right now is, and it's hard to care when it feels like the world is crashing down around you. It's hard enough to change yourself. What hope is there of one person changing the world? Well, if you've ever listened to the song Call Your Mother by Tom Cardy, and if you haven't, you should, because he's very funny, you'll have heard the lyric, "If you don't do small things just because big things exist, you are a giant piece of doo-doo feces." But the album version of the song changes this lyric to, "If you still do small things even though big things exist, you're on your way to crushing it." And that, to me, is Alba's whole vibe. It's Us Two Games' whole vibe too, with their commitment to fund the planting of a tree through reforestation organisation Ecology for every sale Alba gets. At the time of uploading, Alba A Wildlife Adventure has helped fund the planting of over 1 million trees, which is a fantastic achievement even when you take into consideration how many others have been lost to deforestation in recent years. Go to the game's official website and you'll find an entire page about how you can get involved with helping protect the planet. It's why it's so important for the player's experience that Alba is a kid. That way she stays innocent of big problems, wondrous of the world, confident that she can change it for the better. And that is shared with the player too, as much as the sense of discovery whenever you come across a new fine addition for your collection. It's why I think the game is such an effective power fantasy. It is a common and not undeserved stereotype that the standard video game power fantasy involves a big gruff dude ready to shoot his way through as many people as he has to in order to either save or avenge his country, his partner, or more recently his child, in a grinder of big guns, big guts, and big sadness. A more recent example of video game power fantasies are titles that let you play as the monster. Either way, you're an unstoppable force of nature synonymous with the kind of graphic violence that other troglodytic myrmidons are always blaming society's problems on. I remember many years ago when I was a child, I was over at a friend's house and he was talking with his family about violent video games. A close relation of his had recently had a kid, and they were adamant about not letting that child anywhere near violent video games. But they conceded Mario was okay. And my friend said something along the lines of, "Yeah, but Mario jumps on Goombas and Koopas and kills them. See? Every video game is violent." I can't tell you why, but that conversation has stayed with me over the 15 odd years since it occurred, because though it is untrue that every video game ever made revolves around violence, it sounds like it has merit. After all, violence is an easy source of conflict in any work of fiction, but especially for a video game, regardless of whether it's treated as serious or slapstick. Part of what he said said was and still is true, too. Mario games do feature cartoon violence. A lot of games aimed at kids do. A lot of games aimed at kids just have regular violence. Even Alba gets a little violent toward the end. But after a while, it kind of gets old. There's a point where there's such a saturation of similar power fantasies that the experience just becomes mundane. Banal, even. The president's daughter has been kidnapped by cultists. Hang on, I think I can slot that in between liberating City 17 from the Combine and the recon mission up to Katorga 12. I'm not saying such games can't be good, or fun, or subversive. A lot of them are great, gore and all, but at some point it just becomes a fantasy. Power no longer factors into it. When everyone's super, no one will be. Alba, by contrast, offers you the chance to experience what it's like to stand up to corporate greed and political corruption with something as simple as a local petition and win, with all the confidence that only someone who doesn't realise such things shouldn't be possible, like a child, can possess. I'm never going to fight demons on Mars, or save the president's daughter from a cult of parasites. No one is. But I have seen politically okayed corporate interests threaten areas I've called home, like Alba does in this game. Whether or not some of these interests are defeated is yet to be decided, but Alba: A Wildlife Adventure gives me hope that maybe they actually will. Alba: A Wildlife Adventure is an inspirational work. It made me want to go out and photograph animals in my own environment, and it gave me hope that despite the current state of the world, maybe things can work out for the better. A lot of people play games for the fantasy of it, to be the one who saves the day. Sometimes that means playing as a big dude with bigger guns who can and will single-handedly slaughter entire armies in order to achieve his goals. In Alba: A Wildlife Adventure, it means just getting to make a difference, no matter how small, in the face of overwhelming odds. And if she can do it, well, maybe we can too. Thanks for watching.
Hello, you must be Alba Vicente and Amelia's granddaughter. My name's Laura. I'm the only police officer on Sekarao. Luckily there's not much crime here. Are you going to cause any trouble?